You've ended things that were still good, not because something went wrong, not because they hurt you, not because you stopped caring. You ended it because you felt something shift, some quiet signal that told you this was going to hurt eventually. And instead of waiting for that eventually, you got there first. You pulled back, you went cold, you found a reason to leave. And when people asked what happened, you said it just wasn't working. But that wasn't really it, was it? The truth is quieter and older than that. You left because somewhere inside you, at a level deeper than logic, being left is the one thing you have decided you will not survive again. This is the psychology of people who leave before they get left. And this isn't a character flaw, it's a pattern. And once you understand where it came from, you will never see your relationships the same way again. Nobody is born this way. You weren't always someone who ended things first. There was a version of you, younger, more open, who loved without managing the exit, who let people in without calculating how much it would hurt when they left, who stayed in things fully, without one foot already pointed toward the door. And then something happened. It doesn't have to be one dramatic thing. Most of the time it isn't. It's a series of smaller moments that added up to a lesson your nervous system wrote in permanent ink. Maybe it was a parent who left, physically or emotionally, and the silence they left behind felt like proof that closeness always ends in loss. Maybe it was a friendship that ended without warning. One day they were there, the next they weren't, and nobody explained why. Maybe it was a first love that ended in a way that made you feel like the most dispensable version of yourself, like you were easy to walk away from. Whatever it was, your brain did what brains do. It learned. It looked at the evidence and drew a conclusion. Getting close means getting hurt. Love has a price, and the price is always paid at the end, and the end always comes. So if the end always comes, why wait for it? That's the logic. It doesn't sound like fear when you're living inside it. It sounds like wisdom. It sounds like self-awareness. It sounds like you just know how things work. But underneath the knowing is a child who got hurt badly enough that their entire system reorganized itself to make sure it never happened again. Preemptive abandonment, that's what psychologists call it. And it almost never looks like what people expect. It doesn't look like obvious self-destruction. It looks like clarity. It looks like maturity. It looks like you just being honest about what you want. Sometimes it looks like this. Things are going well with someone, better than you expected. They're kind, they show up, they seem genuinely interested in who you are. And instead of feeling safe, you feel something that is very close to panic, because good means something real is forming, and something real means something real to lose. So you start pulling back. Slowly at first, you take longer to reply. You become suddenly busy. You start noticing small things that bother you, things you would have let go before, and you hold on to them like evidence, evidence that this isn't going to work, evidence that leaving now is the right call. Sometimes it looks like picking a fight right when the relationship starts to feel serious. Not a big fight, just enough friction to create distance, enough distance to breathe. Because breathing, that particular relief of not being fully seen, is something your body has learned to need. Sometimes it looks like ending a friendship that was still good, not because anything went wrong, just because you felt it changing, and change has always meant loss, so you got ahead of it. You went quiet, you stopped reaching out, you let it die on your own terms instead of waiting for it to die on theirs. And every time you do this, you tell yourself the same thing. You just knew. You could see where it was heading. You were being honest. You were protecting both of you. But here is what's actually happening underneath all of that. You're not protecting yourself from a bad relationship. You're protecting yourself from the specific pain of being chosen and then unchosen, of being known and then left anyway. That is the pain your system has organized its entire life around avoiding. Here is what the pattern costs you. And this is the part most people don't want to look at. Every time you leave first, you get to keep the story where you were in control, the story where you made the call, the story where nobody got to reject you because you rejected them first. And that story feels like power, but it is the most expensive kind of power there is, because what you spend it on is the possibility of being genuinely known by another person. The people who leave before they get left are not cold people. They're not people who don't care. They are often the most feeling people in the room. That is exactly the problem. They feel so much that the possibility of loss becomes unbearable before the loss has even happened. So they create the loss themselves, on their own schedule, in a way they can survive. And what they don't realize is that they're surviving the wrong thing. They're surviving a loss that never happened, and in doing so, they create a real one, a real connection that could have gone somewhere, a real relationship that had not yet shown them what it could be, a real version of love they will never find out about because they left before it had the chance to prove itself. Over time, this compounds. Each preemptive exit confirms the belief that drove it. You left because nothing lasts, and because you left, nothing lasted. The pattern feeds itself, the belief gets stronger, the walls get higher, and the version of you that once loved without calculating the exit gets quieter and quieter until you almost forget they were ever there.
There is a specific kind of loneliness that belongs to people who leave first. It is not the loneliness of being alone. It is the loneliness of being the one who always ends things, of looking back at a trail of relationships you walked away from and wondering, what if I had stayed? What if just one of those had been worth staying for? And the cruelest part is this: you probably already know which ones were worth staying for. You know exactly which friendships you let fade that didn't need to fade, which relationships you ended that still had somewhere to go, and you carry that knowledge quietly, because admitting it would mean admitting that the pattern has cost you real things, not imaginary losses, real ones. Psychologists who study attachment patterns describe what's happening inside a person like this as a constant low-level threat assessment. Your nervous system is always running a calculation in the background. How close is too close? How much would it hurt if this ended right now? At what point does leaving become necessary? It is exhausting in a way that is very hard to explain to people who don't run it, because it looks fine from the outside. It looks like you have your life together. It looks like you make clean decisions. It looks like you don't need anyone. But inside, you are always one step ahead of an ending that may never come. And living one step ahead of a loss means you never fully arrive in anything. Think about the last time someone got close, really close. Close enough that it started to feel real. And think about what you did with that. Did you lean into it? Or did you find a way, anyway, to create a little distance, a small fight, a cooling off, a reason to slow things down, a reason that made perfect sense when you explained it to yourself at the time? Now ask yourself something harder. Was the reason real? Or was the reason just the story your nervous system wrote to justify doing the one thing it knows how to do when things get real? Leave first. Because here is what people who run this pattern never quite let themselves see. The threat is almost never as real as it feels. The person getting close is not necessarily going to leave. The relationship getting serious is not necessarily going to hurt you. The friendship deepening is not necessarily going to end. Your nervous system does not know the difference between a real threat and a feeling that resembles a past threat. It just knows that this feeling, the feeling of being close to someone, of being known, of something mattering, is the same feeling that was present the last time you got destroyed. So it fires the alarm, and you leave, and you call it a decision, when really it was a reflex. You were never afraid of them. You were afraid of what it would feel like when they left, and you spent so much energy preparing for that ending that you never gave yourself the chance to find out whether it was actually coming. The pattern doesn't break because you understand it. Understanding it is just the beginning. The pattern breaks when you stay in something past the point where leaving would have been easier. past the point where your nervous system is screaming at you to get out, past the point where you have run every calculation and the math says go and you choose to stay anyway. Not because you're certain it will work, but because you finally decide that the possibility of something real is worth the risk of something painful. That is the bravest thing a person who runs this pattern can do. Not skydiving, not quitting their job, staying. Staying when everything in them is coded to leave. Staying long enough to find out whether the person in front of them is actually going to go, or whether that was always just a ghost from somewhere else. You have probably spent years being very, very good at leaving. Clean exits, controlled endings, stories that made sense. And somewhere inside that competence is a person who is deeply tired of being the one who always goes, who is quietly wondering what it would feel like to be somewhere long enough for it to become something. You don't have to keep leaving first. That's what I want you to take from this. The version of you that learned to do this, they were trying to protect you. They did the best they could with what they had. But you are not that version anymore. You know more now, and knowing more means you get to make a different choice. The question isn't whether you're capable of staying. You are. The question is whether you'll find someone worth the risk of finding out. Next episode, there's a person who never leaves. They stay through everything. They show up for everyone. They make themselves so needed that walking away feels impossible. And underneath all that showing up is one of the loneliest patterns in psychology. That one is next. I'll see you there.